Hello and welcome to Mystical Tutor. These are a series of 5 to 15-minute classes designed to help you improve your knowledge of the rules and policies of the Magic the Gathering Judge program. This lesson will cover what happens when a spell or ability resolves. We will go over target legality, making choices during resolution, information spells need while resolving, and what happens immediately after something resolves. Once you cast a spell, it doesn't resolve immediately. Instead, both players have to pass priority without doing anything. Then the top spell or ability on the stack begins to resolve. First, the spell or ability checks to see if any targets it may have had are still legal. If the target has changed zones, it is no longer the same object, and it is not legal anymore. This is true even if it ends up in the same zone it originally was when it was targeted. A spell like Cloud Shift can save your creature from a targeted removal spell. If the target has changed characteristics, it might be illegal as well. A creature targeted by Doomblade could gain protection from black, or, in some cases, become black, both of which make it an illegal target. At this point, if there are no legal targets, the spell is countered by the game rules and does nothing. This means that if your opponent sacrifices the target of Pressure Point in response to the spell, you won't draw a card, because the spell was countered. However, if there are some legal targets and some illegal targets, the spell does as much as it can. If you split the damage of Electrolyze between your opponent and their creature, and they sacrifice the creature, you'll still get to draw a card, because the spell still has a legal target. Okay, now that we've checked for target legality, we get to the good part, following the instructions on the card in order. In some cases, this is intuitive, like Hunt the Weak. You first put the counter on your creature, then it fights. In other cases, you might not want to resolve the abilities in order. For example, with Dramoka's command, if your opponent has 2 enchantment creatures, you might want to fight one of them, and force them to sacrifice the other. However, because they are not printed in that order, your opponent has the opportunity to sacrifice the enchantment creature you targeted with the fight mode. While many choices are made during the casting of a spell, some decisions are made during the resolution. For example, you choose what color to get protection from with God's Willing when it resolves, not when you cast it. Sometimes a player will make a choice before a spell starts resolving that can only be made while it is actually resolving. This player is attempting to create a shortcut to when he would make a choice for the spell. If the opponent interrupts this shortcut, the player may change his or her choice when the spell does actually begin resolving, because the new information has been introduced to the player making the choice, and it wouldn't be fair to hold them to their original choice with this new information. If more than one player needs to make a choice, the active player makes their decision first, then the non-active player. For example, if a player casts Innocent Blood, assuming it is that player's turn, he or she will choose to sacrifice a creature. Then the opponent will do the same. Then the actions happen at the same time, in this case, putting both creatures into their owner's graveyards. If the spell or ability needs information about the board state, it checks once. First, it uses the current information from all objects in public zones that haven't moved. Then it uses the last known information of objects that have changed zones. Something like the card Flow of Ideas would check how many islands are on the battlefield exactly once while it is resolving, while cards like Momentous Fall use the characteristics of the sacrificed creature from when it was last on the battlefield to get the information that it needs. If the spell or ability refers to a specific but untargeted object that has changed characteristics, and you want to apply an effect that doesn't seem to make sense for that object, you still apply it anyways. For example, Let's say you cast Rude Awakening Entwined. After that resolves, you cast Otherworldly Journey on one of your lands. At the end of the turn, even though your land is not a creature anymore, it would still come back with a +1/+1 counter on it. Okay, so now we're done with what the spell actually does. Now what? If the spell is an instant or sorcery, the last step of resolution is putting it into the graveyard. This happens before state-based actions are checked. That means if you cast something like a lightning bolt targeting a Tarmogoyf when you already have a creature and land in your graveyard, it won't actually die. It'll be a 2/3 with 3 damage marked on it, but before state-based actions are checked, the lightning bolt will be in the graveyard, and the Tarmogoyf will be a 3/4 with 3 damage still marked on it. If it is a permanent spell that is resolving, you simply just put it onto the battlefield. Some permanents have effects that modify how they enter the battlefield, like Phyrexian Metamorph. Similarly to a spell that makes choices when it resolves, Phyrexian Metamorph has you choose an artifact or creature that is on the battlefield as it is entering the battlefield, then it becomes a copy of that creature. And that's it! The spell has been cast and resolved. Always remember that when resolving a spell, you have to check for target legality, then do what the card says in order, then put it in the graveyard or on the battlefield depending on if it is a permanent or not. This concludes the lesson on resolution spells and abilities. For additional lessons, visit Mystical Tutor online at mysticaltutor.org.